Yeah, welcome all. There's Barry. Glad to see you here again. Teresa, Lucy, Madeleine, Roger, Alden, and Chris. Good to see you again. Hello. Oh, sorry, I'm just going to get the sun rather miraculously for Manchester has just started to shine right across my screen. I'm going to have to draw a curtain. Give me a moment. So last time round, we were looking at the Bodhicharya Avatara, chapter 6, verse 23. So we'll carry on with that. Let me just 23. There we are. So I'll just recite it through once, and then we'll see if we can pick up where we left off. So anishyamanampyetat utpadyate yatha anishyamanopi balat krodha utpadyate tatha. This yatha and tata, it's more common to see them at the beginning of the line or at the beginning of the sentence than at the end. In prose, you would almost invariably see them at the beginning of the sentence, but we have the greater flexibility of poetry. So yata, just as everything in line one happens, then tata, thus in that same way, everything in line two happens. The shula, oops, I got my books here. Shula originally meant like a spike, a sharp spike or something like that, and then came to mean by extension a sharp pain. So just as the sharp pain arises, anishyamanam, unwanted. So somebody was trying to get in. There we go. Let's wait for Sanyu to come in. I can't remember whether I have fully explained, and indeed if I have, whether you have all fully grasped the passive present participle of anishyamana. Is this something that you have all, sorry, I'm being distracted by noise of builders here. Is this something you have all fully grasped?
No.
Okay, so we have one no. How many yeses do we have? Teresa, have you fully grasped it? The present passive participle. What about you, Roger?
Well, probably not fully. No, I think partially.
Okay. You gave me a signal, Chris, but I'm not sure whether I interpreted it correctly. Did you give me a signal to say, yes, you have fully grasped it, and you can now give an explanation to the rest of us?
Um, I think there's two no's there. I can't remember actually. I certainly didn't grasp it, even if you did.
Okay, welcome back, Sanyu. Right then, I think I'd better explain it. Amishyamana. Across my desk.
If it's Atmanepada, it has the ending mana.
Yes. Yes, it does. But it's also more specifically, you've got the, just let somebody in. You've got the Parasmaipada and Atmanepada endings. Actually, I'll deal with this point as well. Look at this verb, utpadyate, from the root pad. Utpadyate. Now, this is actually a class 4 Atmanepada verb, which is why it's not padati, but firstly, you add a ya to the root for the class 4 padya, and it's an Atmanepada, so padyate. And there is a potential ambiguity there in class 4 Atmanepada verbs and regular passive verbs, as I will explain. So let's just look first of all this utpadyate. This is a very, very common word. You've heard of the dependent co-origination or conditioned co-arising. That's the praticca in Pali, praticca samuppada. In Sanskrit, pratitya samutpada is this utpad. The utpad from a very common root pad, meaning to go. As we all know, cognate with our modern English word foot. Utpad, literally up go, to go up, to arise. So it's the standard word, or one of the standard words. So I dare say it's the most common. I think it's the most common, meaning just to arise, to come into existence. So with conditioned co-arising, you get the pratitya samutpada, the utpada arising. Now, let me just call up Moni Williams. If you can get this bit, you will have achieved much. Hang on, I'm just calling this NW Advanced. Here we are. Bear with me. Okay. So let me just highlight off search again. There we are. So our very, very common root, pad, to go. It means to fall as well. It means to fall and to go. But just live with that. The most common meaning is to go. And if you look here, it's class 4, Atmanepada. That will tell you so is the iPad up on screen, okay? Okay, thanks. Vad, meaning to say, is class 1, and it's parasmaipada. That's about the most common form of verb we have, and that makes vadati, he says. Had, by contrast, is a class 4 Atmanepada, which in those of you who know Greek, that's the middle. So what happens? Vadati it's not padati. First of all, because it's a class 4 verb, a ya comes in between the root and the ending, and it's not ati, but ate. So, class 1 parasmaipada, vadati. Class 4 atmanepada, padyate. This one, by the way, padyate, you will see in Pali as padjati. Because although you do in Pali have atmanepada endings, they are sporadically used, and they mostly use the paraparasmaipada endings. And remember, whenever you have, I'm not sure if there are any exceptions, if there are, they're very rare exceptions. Once a verb has decided that it's in a class 4 atmanepada, for example, you then put a prefix on it, a verbal prefix, it will remain of the same class and remain, the same voice, as it were parasmaipada or atmanepada. So utpadyati, so utpadyate, padyate, it will remain utpadyate. And that's the one that you will see in Pali by regular phonetic mutation, upajati, but with the parasmaipada ending iti instead of te. Now, let us compare that with the pure passive. There can be an ambiguity. Let's look at the very common root, a standard root, standard paradigm, pach, meaning to cook, cognate with our English word to bake, actually. Now, that is a class 1, parasmaipada, so third person singular, pachati. Now, let us make a passive verb out of that. Now, I think all of you have seen the various classes of verb, from 1 through to 10. There are 10 classes of verb. But the formation of the passive does not fall within that regime at all. The regimes whereby we look at the classes of verbs at classes 1 through 10, which class is it? That does not apply to the passive. The formation of the passive, all you do, you take the root and put in, have a thematic ya, pachya, and you, for a passive, you always have the atmanepada ending. So pachyate, pachati, he sure it cooks. Pachyate, passive, it is cooked. Now, by coincidence, the passive form looks identical to the class 4 atmanepada form, but that's just a coincidence, and you just have to know which is which. Mostly there will be no ambiguity, but there can be. Now, looking now at the pure passive, let us look at the present passive participle, something that is being cooked. And very simple, it is pachya mana. And it's always formed with the stem pachya and adding mana. And it's the same, actually, the same in Greek. You get this middle present participle, middle and passive present participle ending menos in Greek, as in lego, I say, prolego, I say in advance, or I make an introductory comment. And our well-known word prolegomena means things that are said beforehand, namely in introductory comments, prolegomena. Now,
Sorry, James, could I just clarify something? I'm sorry to
Please
interrupt.
do, yes, Barry.
Could you explain the difference in meaning between Pachyate and Pachyamana?
Chiete is simply the present tense verb, finite verb, meaning it's got a time and a person. Pachiate means it is being cooked. And it's a verb. But pachiamana is the adjectival form, the participial adjective, something that is being cooked. It is.
Yeah, I've got that. Thank you.
Okay, right. Now, we've got a lovely example here of how the classes of verb are completely distinct from the present tense. Sorry, cancel that. How the passive is completely distinct from classes of verb. If you look here at the root word ish, the root ish, it's slightly irregular because it makes its present tense ichhati. Same in Sanskrit and Pali. Ichhati, he sure it wants. Quite a common verb. However, now we're going to make a passive verb. It is wanted. Now, it's slightly irregular there because the sh becomes a ch. But when you make a passive, the passive is much more regular. You've got your root ish.
We can't see the iPad, Joe.
Sorry. There we are. Okay. So ish, ichhati. But we're going to make a passive now. Now, how it behaves in the present tense is completely irrelevant to how the passive is formed. Passive is a different regime and much simpler. Just add ya to the root. So, ish, to want. Ishyate, it is wanted. And ishyamana, desired. It is something that is wanted. Ishyamana, wanted. And often you'll find it in the form anishyamana, unwanted. So ish, ishya, passive stem, ishyamana, adjectival form, and just put the a becomes an, of course, before a vowel, anishyamana, unwanted. So this word that we've just seen here, anishyamanam and anishyamano, is a regularly formed present passive participle from the root ish. You see the ish there, passive stem, ishya, passive stem with the present participial ending, ishyamana, negate that, anishyamana, unwanted. So, etat shulam becomes by Santi etat chulam, the word ending in a t, the next word beginning with a sh, they merge by Santi to become a double ch. That's how we get to see it. Without Santi, etat shulam. With Santi, it's etat chulam. So, even though, or just sometimes it's just an emphatic, etat chulam utpadyate arises, then yata etat chulam utpadyate anishyamanam, just as this pain utpadyate arises anishyamanam, unwanted. And again, now look here, this is neuter singular to agree with shulam. It's the unwanted pain. So just as a pain will arise unwanted, tata, in that same way, krodha utpadyate, anger arises, balat anishyamanopi, which is anishyamana api, arises unwanted, balat. Balat is just the ablative form of bala, meaning force. Balat, literally from force or through force, meaning it's forced on you. It arises without you wanting it to. It's, as it were, forced on you by from force, meaning from an external force that you can't control, or most people can't control. So, just as a sharp pain can arise unwanted because of some external influence, tata, in exactly that same way. Krodha utpadyate, anger arises, balat, by force, because of some force acting on you, anishyamano, unwanted. So he's saying here why one shouldn't be upset at people being angry. Effectively, he's saying, I think he said it was in the previous verse, that that anger arises in people beyond their control. If they're kind of haven't developed their minds, as it were, anger will arise beyond their control. Don't be upset they're getting angry, just in the same way they might suffer pain if they get stabbed with a spike. I'll just dwell a moment on this utpadyate. I think most of you will know the Pali expression of the conditioned co-arising or dependent co-arising, paticca samuppada. This is actually one of the most central concepts in Buddhist philosophy, is paticca samuppada. In Sanskrit, pratitya samutpada. And there are even some people who don't fully understand the analysis of the Pali and Sanskrit expressions. Would you like me to explain it? Kath, do I get a yes from you? Okay, and I've got a yes from Sanyu as well.
Yes.
Are there any no's?
No.
Okay.
By
On
the
the
way,
face,
James, sorry, just before you get into that,
yeah.
in the third version without Sandy, should that in the third pada, should it not be Inishamanaha?
You have, Roger, disclosed to me, to my slight embarrassment, a failure on my part to remove the sandhi, which I shall do. You were absolutely right. Without the sandhi, you're absolutely right. It should be anishimana api. You are right. Thank you for that.
Sorry, could you just briefly explain what's meant by Sandy?
Sandhi, okay.
Sorry.
Sandhi, yes, I'll do it very briefly. And it's the etymologically the same word as the Greek word synthesis. So, okay, let me just explain briefly. We've got the root dha, meaning to put. Also, in the oldest form of the language, it means to do as well, to put and to do. If you look back in the Indo-European languages, you'll often find that a verb meaning to put and to do can were almost merged into one. So this root dha, by the time it got into Vedic and Sanskrit, essentially meant to put. When it appears at the end of a word as part of a compound word, the verb changes to di. So to put together is samdha, sum together, dha put, to put together. The verbal noun is sandhi. Sandhi, putting together. It is directly cognate in Greek with the Greek sunte, from which we get synthesis. So it's a word that's come from Greek into English. So synthesis, putting together. Sandhi, putting together. They are etymologically the same word. So what sandhi here means, to answer Barry's question, is in Sanskrit, where you get, and same applies to largely to Pali, but not with the same regularity. In sandhi, where you get a word ending in a particular vowel or consonant, meeting with the following word, beginning with whatever it begins with, you very often get the vowels and consonants influencing each other. When you get a word ending in ah, there as an ishimana, followed by another word that begins with a short ah, what happens is the ah becomes o, and the initial ah drops. So without the sandhi means this process of altering the sounds at the beginnings and ends of words depending on what comes next.
Yeah,
So
it's actually very similar to what happens in Welsh, called a euphonic change.
okay, yes, it is. Yes,
Yeah.
they do have the same phenomenon in Welsh as well.
Euphonic mutation.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So euphonic mutation, but in Sanskrit, there's a lot of it about, and there are fairly precise rules for it. So here you say without the sandhi, so with taking out the sandhi, just looking at the words in their raw form. For example, you see etat followed by shulam. However, by euphonic mutation, the ta, when a final ta meets an initial sh, it changes to a ch, etat shulam. And you'll find that an inviolable rule. There are some rules of sandhi that are in Sanskrit, the occasional fluidity, but mostly not. In Pali, there's quite a lot of fluidity. And also, for instance, look, if you see api etat. So you've got the word ending in an e, and the next word beginning with a dissimilar vowel, e. The e mutates to a consonantal y. So it's not apietat, but apietat, apietat. So this is by the rules of sandhi. So looking at paticca samuppada, we'll look at it in Sanskrit and Pali, because the follows pretty much. We'll look at it in Sanskrit first. Praticca samutpada. Many of you will know it better in its well-known Pali form of paticca samuppada. Sorry, my pen is going funny. Sorry, this is a long E. So if you go from pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit, then it's by standard phonetic mutation it becomes praticca samuppada in Pali. So we've got the pad, meaning to go. We've got utpad, literally to outgo, meaning, and that means to arise. By the way, ut means both out and up. So to go up means to arise, as in come into existence. We'll now make a verbal noun out of that. Very commonly, it happens that when you get a root that has a short a followed by a single consonant, it makes its verbal noun by lengthening the a and by adding an a. So pad, pada. And for example, from our root vad, to say, we get vada. Vada means a saying, and by extension it means a teaching, as in Theravada, Theravada, which means the elder the teachings of the elders. So, but to utpad, to arise, we make a verbal noun in that same way, utpada, arising. Now, this prefix some cognate, as we know, with the Latin co and con, meaning together or with. All of us know a very large number of words that begin with con, from the complete, conjoin, combine, a con and co, essentially the same. A co-worker, somebody who works with you. The word complete. So in Latin, and again we have, of course, in English via Latin, we have this prefix co and con having a kind of a wide variety of meanings, but they all under one great umbrella of either coming together, convent, convene. Also, it can have the sense of a completion, even the word completion itself. The word pletus in Latin means full. If you add a con in front of it, making completus, which gives us our English complete, what does it add? It just adds a sense of fulfillment or achievement. What's the difference in pleat and complete? Well, we don't use the word pleat in English. But in Latin, it just adds that sense of job done, task finished. The emphasis is not just on something being full, but the emphasis in Latin is more on, it's the end of the process, the finalization and completion of that process. Now, look at utpada on its own, without the sum. Utpada just can mean the act or the process of arising. With the sum in front of it, it suggests arising and coming into being. In other words, the completion, the culmination of the process of arising, something coming into being. Like we have, for example, bhava, being. Now look at sambhava. Sambhava means birth. In other words, as the process, however much time it takes, process, let's say in the present case of more or less 9 months. But the sambhava is where you are actually now born. You come into being as a separate individual. That is the sambhava. So they've got the bhava, the process of coming, the long process, and the culmination of that process, the sambhava. The culmination of it is when you are born. You are now a new, separate human being, or indeed an animal, the sambhava. Some of you will know the name of the guru much revered in Tibet, the Padmasambhava. Padma. Now, Padma means lotus. Padma Sambhava, lotus born. You know, the story being that he was born in a lotus, Padma Sambhava. Now, Samutpada then, look at Utpada as the process of arising, and Samutpada, the culmination of that. Something has come into being. Now, in this Buddhist doctrine, it can be anything that comes into being, either a physical coming into being or something arising mentally. So that deals with Samutpada, Pali Samutpada. Pratitya is actually slightly more tricky, but hopefully the explanation will remove the trickiness. Pratitya is prati itya. And by sandhi, with the prati I, the prefix ending in an E, the next sound is E, so they merge into a long E. Pratitya. But of course, in Pali, that shortens because it's a double consonant following. So pratitya, what does that actually mean? Okay, so the root I means, as we know, to go. We have remnants of it, not remnants, survivals of it in English. For the Latin, ire, to go. Present third singular, it, he, she, or it goes is it in Latin. And he, she, or it goes out is exit. So the I of exit, which in Latin, by the way, is a verb. He, she, or it goes out. It's used as a noun in modern English. But that I of exit, the same as transit and so on. Transit goes across. That I in exit is the same as the primitive Proto-Indo-European root I to go, and the same root in Sanskrit. So I to go. Now, the absolutive form, having gone, I think most of you know by now that you can add a twa to the root. So having done. Twa or itwa, so veditwa, having said, gantwa, having gone, bhu to be, bhutva, having been. In Sanskrit, and in Sanskrit, strict rule, in Pali it's more fluid again, but strict to Sanskrit, this twa for the absolutive can only be used if it's added directly to the, if it's always added, if it's added to a root with no prefix, so itva. Let's look at the root gam, to go. Having gone is gantwa. And by phonetic, by euphonic mutation, gammatwa becomes gantwa. That's normal. Now, suppose you want to say having come, you just put is gum. Just put an in front of gum, and that changes it from go to come. By the way, the root gum is etymologically the same as our modern English word come. So agam. Now, having come, you can't say, you are not allowed to say agantva in Sanskrit, because there is a verbal prefix before the root. So instead of the twa, you have to put a ya. So gam, gantva, but agam, agamya. If you said agantva, you'd be understood to say, that's wrong, because there's this verbal prefix in front of it. You can't use the twa ending, you have to use the ya ending. So agamya, having come. So here we have the root I, but prefixed by prati. Prati is the prefix of reciprocity or mutuality. It can often mean against or counter. Oh, yes, I remember we discussed this a while ago in connection with your German learning, Chris. I think at the Wiederangriff, was it? Was a counterattack. What was the word for it? Wiederangriff, was it? So the root yud, to fight. Pratyud means either to fight against or to counterattack. It's not just doing, but like doing in relation to something else. If they did double entry bookkeeping in those days, I'm not sure they did, but in double entry bookkeeping, you have an entry and a counter entry. For every entry, you do a counter entry. So they're balancing the books. If they had a word for counter entry back in those days, it would be a prati entry. The verb save, meaning to attend upon or to be attached to something or practice it. If you do evil, you papam saviate. He indulges in evil, but then the papam tam prati saviate. It comes back to attend on him. It like bounces back. So this root prati, I haven't yet got round to organizing my several pages of notes I've made on this wonderful prefix prati, but I'll get it organized soon and make it public on my website thing. And you find quite subtle meanings from pad again. In Pali, pratipada it would be in Sanskrit, which means the path, the spiritual path, the pratipada that the Buddhists follow, and more particularly the monks follow. That's not just the pada, the going, the path. It's the pratipada. It's as if the path that you do not just tread the path, but the path becomes you. You walk the path, and the path walks you. That's the pratipada, the idea of mutuality, reciprocity. Now, back to prati. Prati-e, e to go, prati-e, as it were, to lean against, to go independent, to go dependently upon something. So, for example, this is against, not in the sense of hostile against, but if you lean against a wall, for example, the wall is holding you up. You pratyeshi, you lean against the wall, literally go against the wall. So it is depending or relying on something. Now, if you had e on its own, you make its absolutive form itva, having gone. But the rule I just told you, we've got now prati in front of it, we've got the verbal prefix, so you can't use twa, you've got to use a ya instead. So you would expect to see something like prati ya, but no. The rule is, where you have a root that consists of or is a short I, U, or re, then before adding the ya, you've got to stick a t in. It's just a rule of euphonics, really. For example, Sankri, the root kri, Sankritya, not Sankritva, Sankritya. That T comes in. That accounts for the T in it's a euphonic insertion before the suffix ya. So pratiitya means dependently upon or in a dependent manner. So pratitya samutpada means the samutpada, the coming into being in dependence on something else. So we see the translation conditioned co-arising. I'm not quite happy with that translation. It's much more accurate to say dependent co-arising, because the word condition has got a little bit too many meanings in it. You condition it, and you can have a hair conditioner, for example. You could change the condition of something. But here, specifically in pratītya samutpada, means there is a samutpada, but it depends on something else without which it could not exist. The whole point now of pratītya samutpada, getting to the nub of it, means things come into existence dependently upon other things, in the sense that without those other things existing, they could not arrive, they could not exist. It is a necessary precondition for their existence, not just conditioned, altered by something, but it is a necessary precondition of the existence of B, that A should have existed in advance. That is the exact meaning of, so hopefully the meaning and the grammar and all the etymologies of pratītya samutpada, dependent co-origination. So hopefully there will be at least some clarity in all that I have said. If there is not, please let me know now.
James, could I just ask you to go back to the bit about prati and then the verb e?
Yes.
You said it was like relying. Could you just break that down a bit more? Because e is to go and prati is this kind of reflexive thing. So could you just say that again?
Yeah. Okay. So you are prati, literally again, go against, but against in the same meaning of leaning against, or as against that. So
to go mutually with, like Newton's law or something.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch well. Say again.
So does that mean like to go mutually with, like the leaning against one, pressure on this side and pressure on the other side?
Yes, it does have that meaning. It can mean pressing against, going against. Let me just turn up Monia Williams on the point. Oops. So, okay, I've turned up Monia Williams here. So prati, long e from prati, prati, to go towards, against, or go to meet, or it can also mean come back to. And then it has extended meanings, meaning to accept, sometimes to be content with something. But the basic meaning, to go towards or against, and to resort or apply to, resort to, and have the sense of lean against, depend on. If we look up at the, sorry, let's call that up, a language, English, and okay. So here you see in the Sanskrit pratyeti. So pratyeti becomes pratyeti, and that's how you get in Pali. Oh, giving me quarter screen again. Come on. Head. Dum. Dash it about and things. Oh, here we are. Okay. Here we are. Pratyeti is just the Pali form of Sanskrit pratyeti, to go against, come on to, come back to, fall back on, find one's hold in. So fall back on, it has this meaning of depending on. So can we just continue with your query, Teresa, unless it's answered? It is answered. Okay, right.
For now, that's good.
Okay, right. So hopefully that explains paticca samuppada. And if you're wondering why in Sanskrit, you see there, it's the dental to prati with the dental ta. In Pali, it becomes a retroflex ta. That's one of those things in Pali, it just does. In fact, this prefix, you can have pati. Pali, you will find pati with a dental and pati with a retroflex. It's just a slight quirk of Pali. It occasionally does. So, are we ready to come back to our Bodhicharya Avatara? Right. So, where are we? All this came out of the Utpadyate. There we are. It arises. So the Krodha Utpadyate, the anger arises. Another example of Sandhi here. See, followed by next word beginning with a short becomes o, anishyamana api, anishyamanopi. But followed by any vowel other than a short all that happens is you drop the visarga, that subdotted H. That's why krodha utpadyate becomes here correctly krodha utpadyate. There are lots of these annoying rules to learn. You'll get used to them as time goes on. So we can do some recitations of this. Are there any, before we do that, any queries arising? Okay, we can let us start. Barry, you happen to be first in my gallery. Would you like to have a go at the recital of it?
Anishyamanam apyetachulam utpadyate yata. Anishyamano pibalat krodha utpadyate tata.
You're a fairly recent beginner in Sanskrit and Pali, I think, Barry, is that right?
This is the third time I've been with you.
I think that is a very, very creditable recitation for somebody who's so close to being a pure beginner.
Oh, thank you.
That came out very well. Came out very, very well indeed. Right. So Teresa, would you like to have a go?
Anishyamanam api echu.
Try reading from the one in this box.
Okay.
If you find it easier.
Chulam utpadyate yata anishyamano pi balat kroda utpadyate tata.
Okay, right. Just be strict with yourself on the longs and the shorts. So, for instance, the Reverend utpadyate tata, utpadyate tata.
Utpadyate tata.
Yes, you can do it. You see, that came out perfectly. So, and also say anishyamanopi, anishyamanopi.
Nishyamanopi.
Yeah, perfect. Very good, Teresa. Oh, thank you. Lucy, would you like to come in?
Yes. Anisyamanam apyetachulam utpadyate yata anisyamano pi balat kroda Upadhyate tata.
Right. Be more emphatic with the length, the longs and the shorts. I
Yes.
did detect a little bit of la phonétique du français creeping in there, you see.
Yeah.
So utpadyate yata. Can you repeat that?
Utpadhyate yata.
Right. The way these longs and the shorts can, from the phonetics of our native languages, I mean, a native French speaker, it will distort it one way, native English speakers, it distorts it slightly another way. But just remember, we've got to adhere, try and push aside these influences of our native language and give the long and the short their own native cadence. Utpadyate yata. Okay, thank you, Lucy. Just say once more, utpadyate yata.
Utpadhyate yata.
Okay, that was much better, you see. That sounded, we want to put ourselves back into the pronunciation of the Ganges Valley 2,500 years ago, or in this particular case, only 1,500 years ago. And in case of any of you ask me, how on earth do we know how it was pronounced in the Ganges Valley 2,500 years ago? Well, the answer is, as many of you heard me say already, there's the very, very strong oral tradition in India, and that strong oral tradition has been kept alive in the way that modern Brahmins still chant the Vedas. So although we can't be absolutely certain that it's the same pronunciation, what we can be certain of is that the way the modern Brahmins chant the Vedas is, that's the nearest we'll ever get, following the modern, very carefully preserved tradition of chanting. And indeed, remember that culturally, the way things are pronounced and said in the Vedas is culturally of central importance. And that's why they've been so careful to pronounce the exact cadences of the hymns. And remember Puratvashta. You know about what happened to Puratvashta. I've told you the story of Puratvashta. In fact, it resulted in death in his case, getting the pronunciation wrong. Twashta was a kind of a demigod in Hindu mythology, and he got into a severe quarrel with Indra, the rather more powerful, but potentially sometimes quite a violent god. And Twashta then decided that he wanted to kill Indra. He didn't have the power to do it himself, but he then created an incantation that he chanted over his son when his son was born. And he wanted his son to be the slayer of Indra. And so he did the chant, Indra Shatru, or that's what he should have said. If he'd chanted Indra Shatru, that would have meant the slayer of Indra, so his son would kill Indra. But he made a mistake in the pronunciation. He accidentally said Indra Shatru. These highs and lows were applied in Vedic, but not in later Sanskrit. So Indra Shatru, the slayer of Indra, but Indra Shatru means Indra the slayer. With the different pronunciation, means Indra's doing the killing. So by a mistaken pronunciation, he made an incantation that got his own son killed by Indra. So it was a very powerful incantation indeed, but it completely changed the meaning, getting the pronunciation wrong. And this story is well known among the Brahmins, and no doubt it's taught to children to emphasize the importance of getting the pronunciation right, because the result of getting it wrong can be a very unfortunate incident, like your son getting killed rather than doing the killing. Fortunately, I haven't heard of too many cases of people of the wrong pronunciation resulting in death. However, there's just a salutary warning in the background of how important it is, and back to the story, why to this day, the Brahmins are so meticulously careful about the correct recitation of the Vedas. And as for how they do it, well, just go on the internet all over the place, easy to find on the internet. Wonderful examples of how it's chanted. Okay, where have we got to? Oh yes, all that the story of getting killed if you get it wrong. That was arising out of Lucy. Yes, thank you, Lucy. I'm glad to see you're still alive. Okay. Madeleine,
Yes.
round to you, please.
Anisyamanam apyetachulam utpadyate yata anisyamanopi balat krodha utpadyate tata.
Okay, very nice. And you did this very well, the merging etachulam.
Yes.
Be careful, of course, to make it a double ch. Etachulam. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh. Roger, we're round to you.
Anisyamanam apyetachulam utpadyate yata anishyamano pi balat krodha utpadyate tata. Okay,
very good. But I detected a slight. Were you by any chance, when you did these two words, looking at this box rather than the box above?
I wasn't actually. I know I did get it wrong, but
yeah, I thought I detected a slight hint of the non-sound. You can just say etachulam, etachulam.
Etachulam.
Okay, that came out very well indeed. Etachulam is right. Good, thank you, Roger. We're round to you, Chris.
Anisyamanam apyetak chulam upadete yata anisyamanopi balat krodha upadyate tata.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that was nice. Thank you, Chris. Now from Kath, we'll hear it like the Brahmins do it. Okay, can you adjust your? Oh, there we are. Yeah, your camera had slipped. There we are. Unmute, Kath. Unmute. There we are.
Anishyamanam apyeta. I've got that wrong. Anishyamanam apyeta tachu. I can't get the rhythm here. Sorry. I'll read it. Anishyamanam apyeta chulam. It's easier to chant, actually, isn't it? Anishyamanam apyeta chulam utpadyate yata anishyamano pibalat krodha utpadyate tata.
Do you know, I think I know where your difficulty arose. I have a slight feeling, because what happens, this is a 16-syllable line, and we've got the division, the half, the pada at the end of the 8. But here, anishyamanam apyetat. So
yes, in my head it was fine, but when it didn't come out right.
Okay.
I'll just have another go. Anishyamanam apyetat chulam utpadyate yata anishyamano pibalat krodha utpadyate tata.
Okay, that came out beautifully. I think what may have happened, tell me if I'm right or wrong here, where I've put let me just put a blob there to mark the pada, the natural line division. And you've got 8 syllables plus 8 syllables. Remember, with sandhi, you will never carry sandhi from the end of a line into the next line, but you do apply sandhi between the 2 padas from one half line into the next. The normal sandhi will apply. And I fall into the trap earlier that where you have sandhi applying between the end of the first pada and the beginning of the second one, you can tend to do a mental break and not apply sandhi. In fact, you should still apply sandhi. So although there's nominally a break there, it flows as one utterance. Anishyamana pietachulam etachulam. It would be wrong to stop as etachulam. They wouldn't do it like that.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. It's that sandy right where the sort of natural break is. That,
yeah, and yeah,
confuses the mind.
it does trick the mind. Yeah. Okay. Would you like to recite that line once more, Kath?
Anishyamanamapyeta chulamutpadyate yata.
Okay, this came out nicely then. That came out. Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. Palden. Thank you, Kath. Over to you, Palden.
Anishamanam pietat utpadyate yata yata anishamano pipalat krodha utpadyate tata.
Okay, yes, but can you do it again, but with more emphasis on the light syllables and the heavy syllables and the longs and the shorts?
I'm not sure too what's it on the
there was some kind of slight blurring. Sorry, there was some slight blurring I detected in what you were saying. Sorry, I didn't catch what you just said.
Sorry, my internet connection keeps wobbling out a bit. I'm not quite clear about where you put the long and short syllables.
Okay.
Not off the top of my head anyway, but I'll have a
Okay,
go.
but for example, I'll just mention it here. We all know that the long and the short vowels are clear enough. U, e, and so on. But remember, a heavy syllable, a short vowel followed by a consonant cluster will be a heavy syllable, or a long syllable. So anish, yaman, and here also, it's a short a, but it's a heavy syllable because it's followed directly by a consonant cluster. So etachulam utpadyate yata. So if you're doing it by beats, this is light and heavy, anishya. And in theory, it takes twice the length of time to say it. Like in the chanting, syllables are divided into matras. The matra is exactly the same word as meter. We have poetic meter, the longs and the shorts. And in theory, it doesn't always work out exactly like that, but the theory is pretty good. That it takes exactly twice the length of time to pronounce a long syllable or a heavy syllable as a light syllable. So, one matra, one measure. Ish is 2. Anishyamanampyetachulamutpadyate yatha. There's quite a strong beat in it. I've exaggerated it slightly there. Would you like to do the first line again, Palden, just emphasizing the light syllables and heavy? Anishyamanampyetachulamutpadyate yatha.
Anishyamanampyetachulamutpadyate yatha.
Okay, now that came out very well. Great. Okay, Charlene, would you like to have a go?
Anishyamanam api etachulam utpadyate yata. Anishyamanopi alat kroda utpadyate tata.
Okay, that came out very nicely indeed. But again, would you like to? There was nothing wrong with the way you recited the first line, but can you do it again with this kind of almost a slightly exaggerated emphasis on the lights and the heavies in the same way that Paladin was just doing?
Anishyamanam api etachulam utpadyate yata.
Okay, right. Now, that was exactly right for the light a and the heavy nishya.
Okay.
You were slightly thrown by the sandhi there, because without sandhi, it's api etat, 4 syllables. Api etat. With sandhi, that e becomes a ya, it now becomes a 3-syllable utterance, api etat. But because now, if the api on its own is short plus short, api. With sandhi, the e has become a y. It now counts as a consonant. So this is now what was without sandhi 2 light syllables has now with sandhi become 1 heavy syllable. Apyetat, apyetat. So say that half line again, but emphasizing. I'll say it. Anishyamanam apyetat chulamutpadyate yatha.
Anishyamanam apyetachulam utpadyate yata.
Nice one. That's getting right. And may we now have Sanyu. Would you like to give a recitation for us? And if you want to put a lovely Burmese cadence into it, very welcome. Please do for our benefit.
I'll try. Anishama. I'll start again.
Yeah.
Anishamanam apyetachulam utpadyate yatha. Anishamano pi balat kroda upadyate tata.
Okay, now would you like to do this first line again in that same way as I've been saying, emphasizing Anishyamanam apyetachulam utpadyate yatha.
Anishamanam pye etachulam upadyate yatha.
Okay, that was very, very nice indeed. Much better. Okay, we've come to the top of the hour to shoot off my next meeting. Before we go, any final queries? And if you can't think of one now, of course, then always free to raise them next week. Oops. I'm trying to gather it. There we are. Okay then. So look forward hopefully to seeing you all in a week's time. Okay. Thank you very much for joining me.
James. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye,
Sukhita
everyone.
bhavata. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.